So you guys, once again, my name is Dave Burke, and I was here to just talk a little bit about relapse prevention and just a little self-disclosure. I'm in recovery as well. So I'm kind of proud of all you guys and what you're doing and where you're at in your recovery. So like I said, I was going to talk a little bit about relapse prevention. I wrote a relapse prevention plan and kind of put this PowerPoint together. And so I'll talk about some craving identification a little bit, and then pretty much, it's just going to be some of the objectives be learning about addiction and understanding what drugs are and how they work and how to manage cravings. So I developed a craving scale and stuff like that, which I'll talk about as we go. If you guys have any questions too, just chime in, but I'll stop in a little bit and we can talk about, any kind of questions you have. So as we're talking, you have anything you want to, talk about, just go ahead and bring it up. And I can tell you from my experience and with my recovery and everything, alumni is what really launched my recovery, is being connected and have that portable structure and that connections with other people. And, it made me feel a little bit more comfortable my first year in recovery. So once again, proud of you guys to be participating. So some of the things that we learn about is how to identify high risk situations that might affect your addiction and build avoidance strategies for your relapse, kind of like plan the plan, of kind of, if you guys are going to be doing something, and going to a place that feels uncomfortable or, it's a high risk situation, you might come up with some coping skills and some people use trigger cards. There's all kinds of ways, they have reframing tools to come out with 3 different ways to approach it. You have the best one, and the other 2 you can always fall back on. So it's good for self-esteem too. And so basically, a drug is a pleasure system. It affects our pleasure system. As we use it, we deplete our dopamine. So basically, our system, we build a tolerance of it, activates, the pathways in our brain associated with our feeling, our well-being, our pleasure. And, as we use, more, we create euphoria, but we come down, we feel that dysphoria a little bit. So does anybody have any questions around any kind of what a drug is and what it isn't? Okay. So some of the definitions of an addiction is like we have that compulsion to use. And, as we're using, sometimes we lose control. And so addiction can be, in a couple different could be presented a couple of different ways. Some people isolate, some people are out, but the loss of control the user can't use despite, negative consequences. The compulsion is not rational, or, nothing's really planned. So you basically become pretty unpredictable. Have you guys experienced anything like that in using?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. And then, so as far as the continued use despite adverse consequences, I think we've all kind of experienced some consequences around our addiction, whether it was, with our families, the law or work or, just relationships. Can everybody relate to that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, when it comes to craving, the craving and the daily symptoms of the disease, the psychological, the pre-contemplation and getting to using the drug, it's almost like that psychological getting, prepared to use it and stuff. So like in early recovery and everything, sometimes, it feels uncomfortable doing the right thing as you're kind of experiencing a new way of life as far as in recovery. With the craving and the dysphoric, sometimes it could feel very agitating, and we kind of could be our worst critic sometimes, when we're craving. And So that's why the importance of a really, really comprehensive detox is very important. So some of the things that, we experience is, denial, uh, under the pressure of intense craving, temporarily blinded to the risks of consequences. That means, we'll go to any length to get our drug. So as far as the tolerance and the neuroadaptation, the brain responses over the stimulations from the drug. And does everybody kind of relate to what the tolerance and withdrawal symptoms, kind of like it's like the foundation of your recovery. So the brain decreases in sensitivity and unresponsive. So basically your prefrontal lobes and everything, your pleasure system kind of gets depleted and you kind of become deaf to pleasure, on some points in over the time, which I developed a scale after this slide, is that it produces, the reward system, it compromises it, and the brain, adapts, and the neurotransmitters, you deplete a lot of the dopamine. So, even your serotonin, you have that homeostasis in your body that comes unbalanced. And so that's why the importance of a good withdrawal, healthy diet after treatment, maybe some exercise and stuff like that to get the oxygen back in your blood. Because a lot of times we compromise our system, and you can have the carbon dioxide build up in your blood if you smoke too much or you're smoking meth or other kind of drugs. So, and then understanding the conditions without drugs is profound, as far as the experience of normal pleasure. When sober, the user feels, uh, a little bit different because you're coming off of the drug, so they have when you come through withdrawal, they have after you withdraw and you go through like 30, 60 days, this thing called post-acute withdrawal. And you might feel a little bit, uneasy as far as stuff goes, but that's your body healing, talking to you and saying, hey, we're starting to bounce back from this addiction. And so that's where you create that balance in life. And so that's why it's good to have the holistic approach as far as, mind, body, meditation, and just being present with yourself at that point. And so here's a pleasure scale here. And in the normal range, it is, so when you start using, like say if you were starting to use cocaine or something like that, at first, you'd use it, and over here, you start to feel good. And so that would be, recreational and everything. And so when you start using a lot, as far as like you get very interested and you feel the pleasure system, that's where your prefrontal lobes. So say you use a little bit, you start feeling good, after a while, before you start building tolerance up, you'll feel negative. And then, so you'll have to use a little bit more to get in the normal range. And then you start using a little bit more, and then you get more interested in the drug and everything. But then when you quit using, you get back and you get bored, and this is like a pleasure scale on the prefrontal lobes. And so if this is, if you start using a whole bunch, like, you just start going on a bender and stuff like that, or you've been using for full blown addict, and you're in the euphoria range, you have to maintain that. And this, when you're coming down, you go way back to dysphoria. So that's where the come downs come harder the more you use. So, there's a point where, it can get pretty dangerous if you went to treatment and say you were using heroin or some other kind of drugs that were, you were in this range over here and you detoxed and everything now, and you start off where you left off. And we lose a lot of people in recovery that way, because the tolerance and the neuroadaptation in your body is trying to fight off and heal. So you can never start off where you stopped. So do you guys have any questions at this point or anything like that?
I do. I was because the scale showed the high end as euphoria, but I think you might have kind of touched on it, that you know, you don't get to stay there, because then you're drinking just to not be sick, or you're using just to not be sick, and so there's no euphoria anymore. It's it's a it's bad.
Yeah.
So if you so that kind of confused me, because I equate euphoria with happy, joyful, you know, and that's not what it is at all.
Yeah. And so to answer that is like it becomes like almost a brain disease, to where the euphoria is short played. So I'm sorry if I didn't say that. So the euphoria is kind of a short played deal. Say with alcohol, it's, you know, it could be a depressant too. So you're not really feeling a lot of euphoria, but maybe when you first start off drinking, you get a taste of it. But you know, you can get way over here and be, you know, depressed, you know, say feeling negative, bored, or you could be drinking and not even get in the normal range sometimes. So, you know, that would be part of the pleasure scale, where you're at in your disease. With alcohol, you might just drink enough to feel good. You never get past that, you know, because you're maintaining and sometimes you're just drinking so you're not sick. So,
Right.
you know, in a lot of stages, like in heroin, alcohol, I would say cocaine, and all the drugs, is sometimes we're just maintaining just to get through the day and not feel sick. So the normal range, sometimes when people are feeling negative all day long until they get their fix or they get to drink and they just get into the normal range, and then they get bits and pieces of feeling good, but they're back in feeling negative and bouncing back and forth. It could be because, you know, there's some other stuff going on. It could be like they're struggling with some mental health issues, or maybe some grief or some trauma, and so that's where, you know, treatment comes in. People, you know, get very down to where sometimes they just drink enough just to feel a little bit, um, you know, I would say get out of the board range into the feeling negative to the normal, until they can really get the help they need. Because, you know, sometimes it can be very challenging, and it just depletes your pleasure system as far as any kind of rational thinking. So,
Yeah. Okay. Good.
yeah. So the causes of craving in addicts. So environmental cues, triggers, you know, everybody can relate to any kind of triggers, you know, or anything like that in your using. Um, Immediate capture trauma, you know, as far as overwhelming cravings stimulated by people, places, and things associated with drugs. And so, can anybody like say what a trigger would be, you know, as far as for them? Well, a trigger could be, as far as it could be simply driving to the store, going to a 7-Eleven and looking over and seeing an old friend you used to use with, and just, you know, kind of role playing in your head. Triggers can come off as a lot of different things, as far as, you know, those are things you really want to pay attention to, you know, especially when you're getting out. Uh, Treatment, going into outpatient, you know, it's always good to be aware and present with yourself. And so, as far as the drug withdrawals and the mental health, I think the biggest thing on this slide would be, you know, stress very much equals craving. And so, you know, when we're running a lot of stress and, you know, struggling with, you know, outside issues, some things that, you know, we don't have control of, but we're trying to take control of it. You know, in treatment, you know, some of the things we want to do is really kind of control our stress, because it does compromise our health as well. And having this support actually with alumni and everything like that, and having that human connection, and knowing you're being with people that have been there before, and, you know, have the right intentions, you know, and you have a safe environment. I think that's huge as far as it goes. Can anybody relate to that?
No, quiet.
Yeah, okay. All
I
right.
would encourage all the centers. I know it's a little bit difficult to unmute, but I would encourage you all to, you know, please ask your questions. We've got a real golden opportunity with David here today.
Can you hear us, man?
Yeah, I can hear you. You guys could all talk up. And as far as, you know, I can tell you right now, this PowerPoint will get a little bit, you know, better. I know it's kind of some dry stuff at the beginning, but anything that you guys, you know, I could tell you, as far as alumni goes and treatment, you know, I've walked down that road. I'm still on it. You know, my journey, you know, I totally respect where you guys are at, you know, and I can tell you for me, alumni treatment, aftercare, and my journey in school and doing everything I've done, you know, and from especially where I've come from, you know, the stressors, you know, anything else you have as far as motivational enhancement, you know, having a driven purpose life, you know, and a lot of motivational enhancement and stuff like that. That's what really brought me really far in my recovery to where, you know, I got to do some things I never thought I could accomplish, you know, and that's what recovery is all about. But there were people there before me that were there, and I looked up to them, you know, not for guidance. It's just like, oh, wow, it worked for him. It might work for me. And all I have to do is stay clean and sober one more day to figure it out. And one more day turned into a year. So that's kind of what recovery is. And, you know, like even when I started New Start Recovery Solutions, or I was doing interventions and doing stuff for families and stuff like that, is, you know, it's a healing process, but not only that is the quality of life that you get out of it. And like for mothers, they're secure in their recovery. It takes away the insecurities of their families, their babies, you know, and their kids. And so the whole family dynamic comes together, which is pretty cool. So, you know, that's, I can tell you from life experience, you know, even you guys could definitely stay focused. Do you ever have any questions right now? Just go ahead and talk.
All right, this is Beth from Concord. I got a question for you.
Okay.
What was, if you can recall, what was your biggest surprise trigger? Like when you got back out and about things you didn't expect, or just something that kind of took you by surprise that triggered you?
Okay, I remember that like yesterday. So when I got out of treatment, I went, and I did only go for 30 days, but then I stayed plugged into alumni and aftercare and all this other stuff for like years. Is I went fishing, and everybody was drinking, and I don't, you know, my drug of choice was alcohol, and so what somebody offered me a beer, and I said no, and I had that split opportunity to do it without anybody even knowing. And that was the first time in my life I ever made a conscious decision not to drink. It was so weird, and I felt like I was doing something wrong. Not wrong, but it was just like, you know, I was out of my environment. You know, I was out of treatment probably 30 days, and it was a situation where I had premeditated an exit plan if somebody had asked me that. And what I told them, and I lied. I said, hey, I have to test tomorrow. I wasn't on probation or anything. That was my out. I said, I have to test tomorrow. I can't drink. You know, I'm my employee. And I did go to work through my union if I need to self-disclose. But I also, you know, it was one of those things where, you know, I was true to myself for the first time in my life as far as my recovery went. And so that kind of empowered me a little bit to start making other choices as far as like, wow, maybe I can do this. But see, though in recovery, and the way it works is those cravings come up, they never go away. But if you don't act out on them, I found out they go away longer. But you always, it's not even like you're being tested, it's society at large. You know, there's people all over the place. So, you know, you really have to be present with yourself, not only mind, body, and spirit, but also have those boundaries within saying, hey, this for today, I'm not going to use, you know. So that would have been the first time for me.
Thanks.
Hey man, Alan from Concord. I was gonna see, I'm an alcoholic and drug addict. I was gonna see if you ever have any surprise triggers just in your daily life with all your sober time. Do you ever have just some just surprise pop triggers that just happen out of nowhere?
So as far as surprise pop triggers, I've been working on myself. I'll have 21 years this year.
Wow.
And so maybe surprise triggers really best with me up until about 10 years. But when I say mess with me, that meant I gave it some energy. I thought about, I didn't think about using. I thought, wow, that was crazy, or no, I can't go here and do that. I kind of restricted my life, the way I rolled and everything. But one of the biggest surprise triggers for me personally is being around negative people, to tell you the truth, and people that don't respect the process that I'm trying to go through in my life, as far as, and, you can love people from a distance. I found that out, and so, even, family, I have, a big family, and some people, I can take in little increments, as far as it goes. Does it trigger me to use? No, but does it trigger me to be stressed out? That could cause up and do a domino effect, and maybe down the road, who knows? I'm not going to take that chance. So, I keep my circle pretty tight. I'm not in, I don't, I'm all over the place. Actually, I travel a lot and I do a lot of things. So I had to reprogram the way I did stuff, as far as like, talking to people, changing my environment, maybe some of the things I did challenge myself more to be in a situation where I'm accomplishing a little bit more, and always having a goal, but not only having a goal, having a target date with that goal. So it's just not something I'm always working on. But what's going to really help everybody out, which helped me out the most, is having a mentor, and not just a sponsor. If I have a goal or something like that, I just dig into the people sometimes, that wrote the book, or, at least are doing the right thing for the right reason, because it's the right thing to do. If you just did that, everything kind of does fall into place, I found out, So, I went from, maybe my family didn't want me around, to helping everybody out years later and stuff like that. But, it's a process, but it's kind of like something where, those triggers, when they happen, you just have to, it's such a cliche, this soon will pass, but you just have to tell yourself, I've come this far. And if you don't act out on it, I can tell you right now, it goes away. It just feels like you're in it, you're sinking, but you're not, It's kind of one of those things, if you struggle with anxiety, if you walk through those fears, but you talk about them, don't suffer in silence. I work with a lot of professionals, and, some of the things we talk about, and then, it's just, I work with homeless vets. I work with everybody you can imagine. And it's that communication. It's like saying, hey, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm going through. It's sharing that, not isolating and just letting it build up. So, there's a lot of love goes a long ways. And in recovery, for me, I always thought recovery would be, I have to sit in the AA room, because I was really doing all these things, and what it is, it's just about achieving a good quality of life for you and your loved ones. And maybe, telling yourself, I'm worth having a good life. And, if you just do the right thing, like I say, for the right reason, everything falls into place. But you can't forget about yourself on the way when you're in recovery, because it's kind of, like if there's school you wanted to go to, if there's anything, any kind of passions or dreams you had, pick one out, to see what that looks like. Don't jump into it by yourself. Get a mentor, sit down with somebody, come up with an action plan, and then, know, it's kind of exciting when you start accomplishing stuff to where you can not only empower yourself, it's just, it makes everything else in your kids, you know, you're a good role model and stuff like that. I've had the blessing where my kids have never seen me loaded. You know, that was a big factor in my life. That was a trigger, internal one for me, not the, you know, because, you know, I had lost my father to the disease and it was pretty tragic and stuff. So I didn't want that for my kids. So I did everything in my world. So at first 6 months, that became like some stress and pressure for me to stay clean and sober. But, you know, once I got through it, you know, as far as, you know, working a program, staying connected, the alumni, as hell, I was making the coffee, getting there a half hour early, walking around the block, you know, early on in recovery, you know, it was just, you know, a whole new life. So, yeah, that would be, if I could say anything about being an alumni, is if you have any dreams or goals, this is a time to talk about them, you know, start getting a roadmap to success, whether it's just being a great dad, that's pretty successful. And so, yeah, that's what I think.
Thanks, man, for your input.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So let's just go over to, so, you know, you guys probably, as far as a hijacked brain, you know, individuals come, you know, once you start using, you're out there, you know, you compromise your prefrontal lobes. Those are like, you know, you basically, all your dopamines are ran out. That's kind of where this slides out. And some of the responses are, you know, you basically become deaf to pleasure. You become deaf to a lot of things around you. You present an attachment disorder where you're really not really in the mood to talk about anything because you got your own little clique going on. So it's pretty much what we got out here. And so this is a little bit of, you know, some of the targets where the, you know, the logic of thinking, you know, rationality. The number 3 is the prefrontal lobes. You know, emotion, you know, is sort of your serotonins and everything like that. You know, is seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, and as far as everything goes. But pretty much, you know, when you're going through the cravings, you know, it really compromises everything over on the left, you know. So I think you guys pretty much, now that you're in treatment or experiencing, you might have touched on a couple of these things out in your disease. But you know, the impulse controls and stuff like that, sometimes our character defects roll over into our sobriety. So that's kind of why, you know, there might be some underlying issues after you get clean and sober and stable. You know, it's kind of, they say, peel the onion back. It's always good to take a look, you know, if we have any underlying character defects or anything like that, because, you know, we could always get clean and sober, but, you know, it's always good, you know, to stabilize your thought pattern too. So here's a good thing for the day. You know, I put together overall, it's just a 24-hour craving score. So if you just got up and you kind of looked at this, and a 2 is stress, anxiety, negative feelings and stuff like that. What is my score today? You know, if it's a 0 and you just feel good in the morning, you know, you just check in with yourself. 2, you got a little anxiety. This is early recovery. You know, you got a little anxiety about the day and stuff like that. Any of you, you know, thoughts of using, but I can cope. That means, you know, usually, you know, a lot of people get to the 3s and 4s, you know, early recovery. But, you know, the more you talk about treatment, stages of change, you know, talking about, you know, maybe going to meetings, what work looks like, you know, incorporating outpatient and doing a lot of stuff, you know, if this is something you can check into, and you just share this with your sponsor, your therapist, or anybody like that. What was your score this morning? Thoughts of using, but, you know, you're keeping it real and not struggling too much. But if it's a 10 or something like that, you know, you guys can, you know, talk about, you know, what that looks like, where it's coming from, get onto the feeling and emotion. I wrote a little relapse prevention plan here in the next couple of slides for you guys. So over on the biosocial factors, you know, as far as genetics plays a big thing in relapse, you know, as far as cravings and everything, you know, running into your family, you know, some of the things to process, you know, if you guys have something in there, you know, talk to your counselor, or, you know, kind of do an internal inventory and talk with your sponsor, you know, or maybe at alumni groups, or, you know, if you have any kind of trauma or anything like that, you know, it's always good to process that in a safe place with one of our therapists, or, you know, if somebody, you know, if you have any kind of mental illness, you know, as far as depression or anxiety, any kind of thing like that, you know, if you've been diagnosed and everything, you know, kind of keep that, you know, so you basically run an integrated treatment plan with your recovery. So that way, you know, we can bring in maybe some mindfulness to stay calm, and, you know, maybe bring in some stuff. You guys do anything right now in recovery that kind of keeps you play baseball, badminton, or, you know, anything like that you guys would like to do?
Hey man, Alan, alcoholic, drug addict. I was gonna say, man, I've been exercising and it gets my mind feeling a little better. I'm starting to come back to reality because I was in a whole different headspace in my mind. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing, actually, because you're going to get the oxygen in the blood, which is going to get the oxygen to your brain, which is kind of, you know, that was my saving grace. And still today, you know, I work out all the time, but I eat healthy and stuff like that. But, you know, what it also does is, I'm sure when you're working out and stuff, you can process a lot of stuff because you're in a zone that feels good, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So I would suggest definitely keeping that up. And for people that can't work out hard or do any other stuff and do weights, just walking or getting up and moving around, you know, doing some stuff, because, you know, just we were humans designed to walk and do a lot of stuff, but sitting too long and all that other stuff, you know, we can get, you know, that can, the more oxygen you can get going and you build a little muscle mass, it's going to, you know, definitely keep you kind of centered a little bit. So, you know, as far as, you know, enabling systems, if you guys are going back into an environment that, you know, might not be safe, you know, it's always good to check your options of maybe, you know, a safe place to go, you know, as far as anything, you know, for me, you know, I when I stepped down, I went to outpatient and I did some sober living for a minute. So let's see. Okay. So these are just some addiction risk and resilience, you know. So on the left side would be some things that kind of drive towards, you know, like inherited genetics that we talked about, that in childhood trauma or abuse, you know, unsexual involvement from the age 13, I mean, mental health, depression, anxiety. So some of these things over here, you know, we grew up with, you know, and then on the right side, you know, no family history of addiction. So some people, you know, you have a 50-50 bar of this, or some people, you know, you even see have no trauma, no anything. There's maybe some peer pressure and some social acceptance and stuff like this in through school, or just got exposed. So, you know, some people's environments and cultures could be totally different, you know, than the way they grew up once they get into using drugs. And so, you know, the streets can be pretty rough too. So there's a lot of trauma we experienced there. So here's a relapse prevention thing I wrote here. And so this might be a little more, so a relapse prevention helps us build critical thinking. So the critical thinking and avoidance strategies. So what does that look like for you guys? I mean, a relapse prevention plan is just like, hey, I'm gonna get out, I plan on not using. Well, you know, the critical thinking part is like, I'm really gonna think this through. Just like if you're lost, you're gonna go through a forest and maybe, you know, navigate your way through it, you know, and there's all kinds of stuff in there that can get you, you know, those are avoidance strategies. So, you know, with a recovery, it's kind of like the same way. It's just like, you know, we have to kind of almost plan the plan for the first year, I mean, you know, it would, I used to work and supervise some drug courts and stuff like that. So when we would do an action plan or a treatment plan, we would actually come up with an 18-month-long program and split it up in 4 modules. And that way, you know, we'd build, you know, stuff as far as avoidance strategies, is how we're going to get through the first 60 days of my recovery and still make my meetings and maybe enroll in school. There's a goal, you know. So some of the critical thinking part, that's what that would be. and so that kind of makes it possible to focus on achievable goals. So, you know, a lot of this goes to everything right here on the slide. Just that few words and everything would probably, you know, really save a lot of people a lot of time, to where they could sit down and talk with somebody and say, hey, I have this plan on staying clean and sober. This is kind of what I'm thinking about doing. And this is the way I need to avoid a lot of other things that are going on in my life so I can make it happen. So for everybody, it's going to be a little different, but you know, there's a lot of paths, but one destination, staying clean and sober. So that would be something to take a look at. So in a relapse prevention plan, the main thing we're trying to identify are high-risk situations and how to manage them. So when you get out of treatment or somebody confronts you on a trigger like that, you know, when I got out of treatment, somebody handed me a beer, I said, no, I can't drink it. So those are high-risk situations. Did I plan that? No, it just happened. But I found a way out because I had planned the plan and some avoidance strategies before I got put in that predicament. So I was working my program. So in a relapse situation, self-talk can be negative feelings and emotions. So sometimes we can be our worst critic. So what we have to really do is really, you know, check our self-worth, because, you know, as far as you guys come into recovery and everything, it's, you know, really, you guys got everything going for you at this point. And so, you know, all that negative and self-talk, you know, just there's so many good things that you guys are doing. So it's important to remember with the relapse prevention plan, you don't have to relapse to work it. Okay. So that's the biggest thing I would take away from anything is I'm always on a relapse prevention plan. My daily check-in, you know, I still meditate and work out and do a lot of stuff. But, you know, a relapse prevention plan, also when you're journaling and stuff, you know, once you start journaling and a bunch of other stuff like that, you're going to really recognize, if you go back, like for me, my first 60 days in recovery, I journaled every day. And then I went back and read it and went, wow, I could have did that different. That was different. I could have done that different. And so, you know, even when you become successful in life, most successful people journal a daily schedule, calendar, and have, you know, quarterly reviews and all this other stuff they do. So that's the same thing of journaling in early recovery. Actually, it's just kind of growing in your recovery and being successful and doing something down the road. So you never stop journaling, to tell you the truth. I didn't. And then so with the relapse prevention desires, what are my intentions for the day? So that if you just wake up in the morning, you're clean and sober, and you just said to yourself, what are my intentions for today? This is what I did. So I just kind of put this together for you guys. What do I plan on getting out of this day? So you're already ahead of the game. You're clean and sober. Then you ask yourself your urges. Am I craving my substance of choice? That goes back to that scale. Is my schedule today manageable enough to keep my stress level low? If you start your day off stressed out, you're going to have a bad day, or you're going to be, you know, trying to repair it all day long. So do I plan on doing anything that would sabotage my recovery or my goals in my treatment plan? So that's really huge there. So like the feelings and emotions, and you want to check in yourself, how are you feeling emotionally? You know, are you going through anything? Is there anything you could, like, you know, you need to reach out to somebody and say, hey, you know, I'm just not feeling it today. You know, you got a minute to talk about it. Or maybe just, you know, meditate a little bit and kind of get into a zone to where you feel, you know, or you come up with a little ritual in the morning, what you do until you feel comfortable kind of navigating through your first 90 days. You know, don't put too much on your plate. Find someone you trust, you know, a sponsor, support system, a therapist. Some feelings, emotions can be understood and processed that way. In relapse prevention, it's important to write down your feelings. We talked about journaling. So let's see, here we go. Let's see, where was that? How are you building a better quality of life? So the quality of life actually is probably the biggest thing you could, I mean, everything is good in here, but if you can just maintain, striving towards a better quality of life, for yourself, you can move forward in a positive direction. A better quality of life could just be, hey, I'm working out today, I'm eating healthy. I feel a little more alert. I don't have, my kids we're going to the park, we're playing t-ball or whatever you're doing with them. So, the quality of life isn't all about just things you acquire. It's just life, on life's terms, and, coming back, because one of the things you can never buy is a loving relationship with your family. You have to kind of just be there, and it just kind of manifests, it just works itself out when you do the right thing. So, and always think about how you react to the choices and action in your daily life. So sometimes we can, act out on things that we know we could just stop back, take 10 seconds and think about, and kind of let it go through. And maybe sometimes take ownership if we acted out too quick, say, I'm sorry about this and that, but, So journaling, it really does help identify strategies to build positive outcomes, because it's like an insurance policy with no deductible, because you're writing all your true feelings and emotions down. And when you go back and process them, if you're your worst critic, you're also your best advocate for yourself. So that's the beauty of journaling, because you can just go back and just take a good evaluation, an honest evaluation of your behaviors, and understand the way that will play out in your new life and recovery. So that is huge, as far as that goes. And so as far as, you guys ever do mindfulness, any meditation, or, anything like that, as far as any holistic stuff?
Hey man, Alan from Concord Rehab. Yeah, man, I do this DMT breathing technique, and it's really interesting, man. So it's like a 10-minute video. It's just on YouTube. It's kind of simple, but I'll sit down and I'll hold my breath in for 5 minutes, breathe out, and for about 5 minutes, or not, just keep breathing pretty much, and relaxing, and it releases DMT, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's way cool. Yeah, so anytime you can be present with yourself like that, and just, especially in the morning, when, you wake up, instead of just getting out and just darting for the day, be a little selfish and check in with yourself, and having the internal focus, as far as things go, you can just, get a lot out of a little time that way to, say, this is what I'm going to, it goes with that relapse prevention plan, checking in with yourself, and that stress, it just kind of like, and I would suggest, like a couple times a day, just take a time out, just enjoy, like if it's sunset time, if it's a beautiful sunset or sunrise. Actually, that's kind of what I do in the morning. I have my coffee. I always enjoy stuff like that when I'm doing my calls and stuff. So benefits of mindfulness is it really helps your health all around, your immune system, you can really process a lot of stuff. If you can do the breathing exercises like you were talking about, even if it's, calm, reduces, the anxiety and everything, you breathe in, like you said, this is 5 seconds, 5 minutes might be a stretch, but, just, getting in the zone where, you feel comfortable about, really having a good day. And if you're spiritual, that's a big thing, as far as it goes. I know, as far as a personal spiritual growth, it could be nature, it could be, anything you want it to be, whatever you believe in. So the mindfulness, the practice, the skills and practice loosens and, we identify a lot with thoughts. They help individuals to recognize that, content of the thought. So we can really get in touch with ourselves as any kind of emotions and triggers that are not really true. So by creating a space between the emotional triggers, you know, and the reaction, individuals can create a permanent conduit of restructure in a way. So if you don't think about it and you don't process it, you know, it doesn't really, there's nothing really, you know, to, you know, if there's something that's struggling with you as far as anything goes, and you can get in touch with yourself and, you know, actually walk through this stuff. Because, you know, in early recovery, you know, sometimes we have a lot of baggage, maybe, you know, as far as stuff that, you know, we created out there, whether it's on the streets, work, or whatever. And so, you know, sometimes it's just good to be selfish and take a time out for yourself and say, hey, I can get through this. This is what it looks like, you know, and you will get through it. I mean, because as long as you stay clean, sober, you know, and one of the biggest things is just showing up, you know. You show up, you know, clean, sober, if it's to work or to whatever, to school, you know, you just won the battle, because everything else is going to be a bonus. You know, I went back to school after I got out of treatment. It was pretty hard at first, but I kept on showing up. Then all of a sudden I started getting it, you know, and some triggered in my brain. It was a good trigger. And it was some pathways I must have built up because I started, you know, comprehending stuff. So, you know, it does work, but, you know, it did come with eating healthy and working out and staying, you know, in safe environments, not putting myself in, you know, that was working the relapse prevention plan. So results of mindfulness, and it'll just really bring you some inner peace. And, you know, you might be a little more compassionate to yourself and others, because it gives you time to think about stuff. It's just like, you know, and then, you know, we compromised all our feelings and emotions because we were using in our brain and prefrontal lobe. So you might all of a sudden, I don't know if you guys experience this, but when you're like 60 days clean or 30 days clean, you start feeling things you didn't feel before in your addiction. You might just start crying over a movie, or, you know, being a little more emotional and stuff, which, you know, that's a beautiful thing, because that's your body healing and stuff, and, you know, things are coming back, you know. So you guys ever experience anything like that, a little more kind of emotional or anything like that?
Yeah, I definitely have. My name is Lexi. I think I've been more, since I've been here almost 30 days, and at New Start in Concord. And
Okay.
at first it was really hard to feel my emotions, and they made me like have cravings, and I had a lot of anger and I wanted to leave. And I think now it's like I'm getting a lot more comfortable, you know, going to my therapist and me too, talking about triggers. And now, since I've gone through some of those early days here, it's like become more like a easy practice to like go through my emotions, feel them, and not have cravings now, which is like a big deal, because I thought that would take a lot longer than just, you know, 30 days to be able to feel, not want to run through those news.
Yeah, and you should be very proud of yourself for, you know, putting it out and walking through all that, because, you know, that is going to be a lot of growth there. You know, I would, you know, maybe if you get it to where, you know, you start feeling it, you know, sometimes you write it down, and it's just, it puts it's like, you know, because the thing about, I found out when I was feeling all this in early recovery, when I was writing it down and journaling, because you remember, I don't know about you guys, but for myself, I don't remember everything I'm thinking throughout the day. You know, I mean, with my early recovery and stuff. So I was feeling all these emotions and all this other stuff and everything. So I did take the advice, and I was like, my 6th day in recovery, I started writing all this stuff down. And then I wouldn't read it for 30 days, and I'd go back and read it, and I'd go, oh, and I would look at it and go, how did I get through that? Because I was going through some stuff. I mean, we all go through some stuff. That's why we go to treatment. And I was reading that, and then so it gave me a little launching pad for the next 60 days. So, wow, I got through that because of, you know, all that. And so I was just kind of, you know, creating a safe space for my thoughts to get through the day and stuff like that. So if that made any sense, it does really work. So you should be proud of yourself.
Thank you.
And so, you know, go ahead.
I'm an alcoholic addict. Yeah, man. You know, the emotions really start to kick in. Yeah, I was about 4 days sober back before I relapsed again. I went to this AA meeting and this guy was, you know, we were going around. Everybody was speaking and everything. And the lady that had her, you know, her life story going down, she picked on me. She kind of just said, "Anybody want to speak?" And my name popped up, and she said my first and last name. And then I started, you know, talking to her and telling her about my addiction and, you know, the whole life story little thing, and was tearing up, you know. And I'm, you know, I'm a man. I don't really show my emotions like that, but I was tearing up a little bit, and it's really rare. And then the guy said, he was like, "You know what, man? We all been there. It's because you're facing the truth that you're, you know, you're tearing up like that a little bit. You know, I wasn't crying, but a little bit of, you know, my eyes were getting a little glassy. So."
Yeah. And I truly believe, I mean, I was, for myself, I'll just speak for myself. I was so damaged and tore up and I had so much stuff I was grieving, is that when I was crying, it was almost like cleansing my soul, you know, and I would replace it with everyone like you guys I was surrounded by, and I would get to process with it because, you know, that was my family actually. And so, you know, it was something where, you know, I didn't really know the process or trust it at that point, but I just believed that, you know, it would happen as long as I showed up. And, you know, one day turned into 2 days. And I can remember that I got my 30-day chip and then I got a 60-day chip. I had thought I won the lotto. I couldn't believe I stayed clean that long, right? And so, you know, after that, I was like really empowered. But it was like letting, like in your situation, nobody can take your joy away from you unless you give it away. So just remember that, you know, because, you know, you deserve that seat in recovery just as much as anybody else. And that's, you know, so, but yeah, so, and the mindfulness as far as it helping your recovery, you know, like I hit on a lot of this, the awareness, impulsiveness, you know, because when you're present with yourself, you're not so impulsive. It's almost like, okay, I'm good. You know, I'm not going to really, like if somebody pushes one of your buttons, you might have a little bit more control, you know, because, you know, we're not all well and wonderful as soon as we walk out of treatment. So.
Thank you, man.
Yeah. So, you know, basically what we learn, we practice. I mean, I did a lot of stuff with, you know, I don't know. There's some good books like Ernie Larson. You know, if you guys ever want to read some good books, you know, he's got a quote: "What we learn, we practice. What we practice, become. What we become has consequences. They can be good and bad. You know, everybody thinks you know, so you know, it's kind of what we drive ourselves to do, and I wrote this relapse prevention thing. You guys can take it for what you want, you know, but this is something just kind of look at every day if you want to, or just read it when you want. You know, check in with yourself and your sponsor, or you just check in yourself and your therapist or your best friend who's clean and sober, or somebody that's really got your back, you know, and, you know, find someone you trust and you process, you know, some of the things about the day, you know, and if you're having a bad day, you know, it just means you're having a bad day. You can always start your day over. That's what I had to learn. You know, sometimes, you know, I would have to start my day over at lunchtime because, you know, I had a bad morning. The bad morning could just be something that, you know, triggered me or whatever like that, or something I thought I could control, but you know, it was something, you know, early recovery, you know, you'll have your good days and bad days, but don't let it, you know, it's not worth picking up over. Yeah. So you guys got any questions about anything, or, you know, as far as your recovery goes, you guys, you know, you've been in treatment a little bit. You guys got any, like, can anybody share like what their plan is when they get out? Are you guys going to kind of, you know, keep on working and stay connected to alumni, go to outpatient, you know, Any goals?
Yes. Nina from Concord. I'm probably gonna go to an SLE, if not, head to the domiciliary at one of the nearest VAs.
Uh-huh.
My sobriety.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, yeah, as long as you keep on the positive track, positive things happen. I can tell you that. I mean, recovery is the foundation for that quality of life. So that portable structure you create, it's so empowering once you do it yourself, because then that's what builds your self-esteem up to where you can do anything, and you're doing it clean and sober and still, so that's what's cool.
May I ask what facility you went to for your, yeah.
I went to a facility up in Chico.
Oh, in Chico, okay.
Yeah. And then, I went to Chico for about 30 days, and then I went straight into outpatient. I did alumni. I ran alumni for 2 years on my own, because I went to school and I became a counselor. Then I worked my way doing all kinds of other things. Became an international interventionist and a bunch of other stuff. So, I went basically from my addiction, which brings you homeless and a bunch of other things, to where, you can do anything you put your mind to. You really can. But you got to be able to be present enough in your mind, body, to kind of come up with a plan. And, there's strength in numbers. That's what's beautiful about alumni. And not only that, is when we stick together, a lot of cool things happen. I've been doing it for a little bit. I've seen things that should have never happened, and beautiful things came out of it. I can tell you that. Yeah. So recovery is like a blessing, to where not only that is, it gives you a roadmap to do anything you want in life. So you guys got any questions or anything like that, or you can ask me anything you want.
Monterey's good. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Have a blessed evening.
All right.
David, this is John. I have a quick question for you, if I might.
Okay.
So when you think back in the inpatient treatment that you had, given the years that you've gone through now and the success you've had, looking back, is there anything in particular that you wish you'd have done differently while you were in treatment at a facility?
Yeah, I do. I wish I had more funding to stay longer. I mean, I wish I could have stayed longer. I think when I was in treatment, I was just starting to work a program and getting honest with myself. It took me like it took a minute, to where, I really started going, okay, I can do this. And then, about that time, it was time for me to leave. And so that was a big fear for me. And then, so I got plugged into the outpatient, and I got plugged into the alumni. And then I went back to work, but real soon I went to school. But that was because when I was in, the reason why I went to school is when I was in outpatient, I had a really good counselor and everything. And I was thinking, wow, what a cool job, right? And it's not cut out for everybody. And so I started doing that, and then I went further along, got my criminal justice degree. And so it was just a situation where I just had to stay plugged in for myself in something positive to stay out of the negative, if that makes any sense. So the 30 days gave me enough clarity to say, hey, I'm going to die if I don't do something different, because once in my life, I started feeling the emotions and that love in my heart that was kind of like missing. So if I had stayed a little bit longer, I could probably process more. But selfishly, I went to school for the disease, to learn about the disease, because I had Pell Grants and all that stuff. So I was, and then they made you work on yourself. So it was a 4-year program to get my bachelor's and stuff. And so basically I was in treatment for the next 4 years, going to school, working on myself, learning about, you know, dialectical behavioral therapy, all these little things that nuances that we use in treatment. And so, you know, I just leaned on the people that been there before and did stuff like that. But, you know, if you're only there for, you know, 30 days or, you know, 60 days, I recommend diving straight into some treatment or finding some good people that, you know, you can trust and you can share your feelings and emotions with.